Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the Pork Queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady from the Brady Dental Care Studio, and one thing that everyone's talking about right now is work culture. Should you work from home? Should you work from an office? Where the heck should you actually work? And so who better to talk about that than Geoff Wood, the owner of Gravitate, right here in Iowa. Geoff, thanks for coming in the studio.
Happy to be here, Justin.
And I should say I've been a Gravitate member for quite a while, and many people don't know this, but the Iowa Podcast Studio is within Gravitate East Village. So right now, from your seat, you can see the Capitol building, which is kind of cool.
I can, and I had to travel all of 2 offices over here to the studio today.
Yeah,
from just down the hall.
He basically passed one door and then came down to the studio. I've been wanting to do this for a while, actually, because the topic of work culture is like extremely hot right now. And it hasn't really calmed back down. Obviously, COVID forced a lot of people at home, and some people thought we're going to stay at home forever. We're never coming to offices. We're never going to peek out of our buildings ever again. Other people said, no, we're going to be all in the office. Kind of funny story, but both might actually be wrong, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. As a reminder, if you like unique Iowans and incredible stories, don't forget to go to iowapodcast.com. Also, you can subscribe to this show, because you might be, I don't know where you're listening from. So you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and even iHeart, my former nemesis. But we love iHeart. It's a joke. If you're listening, Mike, it's a joke. All right, Geoff, thanks so much for coming in here. Let's start. I want to talk all about work from home, talk broadly about that, but let's start with the state of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because here's the thing that most people don't know about a co-working space, because that's what Gravitate is. It's a co-working space. We're going to define that. We're going to talk about why that's important. But here's what most people don't know. And I think this is kind of a national thing. I was just in Lexington with a mastermind group of mine, and most of them, I would say almost everybody, don't understand that co-working spaces are essentially the town square of like the entrepreneurial and even intrapreneurial ecosystem, because it seems like there's this gravitational pull of people who kind of think creatively that come to the spaces. It's not entrepreneurs. It's not intrapreneurs. It's not like corporate types. It's kind of this weird mix of everybody. So, but I do want to start with the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Iowa. Are any broad notes on the ecosystem in Iowa? Is it growing? Is it kind of flatlining? What's that look like?
That's a good question. Is it growing is weird thing to track, right? Because we have tried to, folks like Diana Wright at the Greater Des Moines Partnership, Eric Engelman over at New Boco in Cedar Rapids, like we've been trying to get a handle on, is the ecosystem growing for at least 15 years. I think various folks have. But like, what's the metric you look at?
True.
I think the metric that you see most often kind of touted comes from the Secretary of State, has to do with business formations, right? But what is kind of like hidden in that, because a lot of those announcements that will come up be like, the economy in Iowa is great. Look at all these businesses that were formed this quarter. While that's accurate, that they were formed, it doesn't necessarily mean that those are going to be businesses that employ people or create value to more individuals or create jobs, those types of things. Because if you form an LLC to just own a business for tax reasons, that's included in that number, that type of thing. So it's really hard to like strip that down. There are some metrics. The Kauffman Foundation puts out metrics, things like that. So there's a place called the IowaInnovationDashboard.com, which should have the latest data. I think Diana is the one putting that together right now. So that's a good place for people to go see on the ecosystem. But I would say from what I've done with the ecosystem in this time, we're in a pretty good place. I mean, we're fighting some heavy winds, the kind of upstream as far as like, what is the reputation of Iowa? Why should people come here? Like what we're really missing most is density of folks and capital and ideas and things like that. Like the people that are here that are starting things, keep starting things until they're successful. But we just don't assemble a lot of people here like you do in startup hubs like an Austin or a Boston or a Boulder, like people go there to start things. People don't come here to start things yet. We haven't solved that. And like I said, there's some pretty strong headwinds that are forcing us away from that.
Yeah, that is interesting. You see companies like maybe OpenLoop and maybe Dwala
Yeah, both founded by Iowans that were already here, right?
Right. Oh, correct. Oh, so you're saying what we're not doing is drawing in people from other states. It's mostly homegrown talent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong
That's
tradition of entrepreneurs from Iowa building companies here. It's harder to get people to come here for the sake of building. I think people move here for the agriculture industry.
Yeah.
Because they want to be a part of it and it's strong here. They move here for the insurance industry for the same reason. People don't move here to become entrepreneurs unless they're in those two industries.
Yeah.
This just isn't a startup hub that attracts people. And lots of other places have cracked that, and we just haven't here. So I think that's ahead of us. I can get into lots of details on why I think that is, and the funding piece is a big one. Like, it's venture capital here is available, but it's harder to get than it is some other places. So that's a big one. Like, there's lots of reasons why it is that way, and there's a lot of people working on making this place better for that, and that's something I've contributed to a lot over the past 10 years, like wanting to make that better. But it's a constant struggle. I don't know that we'll ever feel satisfied. We'll never be like, things are great.
I mean,
they
that's
can't be
true.
better. It'll always be a fight that we're working on. Anybody that's broadly in the economic development sphere. Like, I'm not an economic developer, but I think a lot of these activities go into economic development.
And I've heard a lot of startups, so what you call the homegrown startups. I don't know if you called it that, but that's kind of what you're saying. And I've seen a lot of that too. And I've heard some of those founders say, Iowa's a different place. Maybe, and this isn't my opinion. I don't know. I even know if this is my opinion. I don't know if it's your opinion. But some founders are like, we're kind of different. We bootstrap here. We raise our own capital. We turn it into something. The coasts are kind of like raise obscene amounts of money, probably lose everything, and then move to the next startup. That's not who we are. So do we want to attract these crazy high valuation companies, or do we want to focus on insurance and ag? And I don't actually know the answer to that.
To your first idea of like what it means to be Iowan and bootstrapping, I think we bootstrap here because there's not a bunch of cash to take. I'm sure a lot of those people bootstrapping, if you were to give them a big investment, they would probably try that way. Yeah. So a lot of the companies that I know that have been successful bootstrapping did it because they couldn't raise money. This is the only way we can move forward. And there's probably some value in that versus other ways. I don't know if we want to change, do we attract other people, but I just think we need more people here doing things. So can't be the same 50 Iowans that are doing everything. We say whatever.
That's fair.
Or 500 Iowans, however many it is. Like, whatever percentage of people are doing things in the economic development, the entrepreneurial ecosystem space now, those people need to keep doing that. But like, the same 50 people come to every meetup, or the same 50 people go to every 1 million cups. What we really need is to have 50 people, but it's different every time because we have so many people interested in the scene. And like, that's the piece I think we need to work on.
Right. And I should clarify, you're not just like, obviously the Gravitate we're in, and the one I normally work at is downtown, but you have you've been in other co-working spaces throughout the state, and you currently manage other co-working spaces throughout the entire state. So this is not a Des Moines perspective you have. I would say this is a very Iowa perspective you have.
Yeah, co-working is for sure all around the state. And I think there are a lot of people that are specializing now or trying to specialize in what does it mean to have rural co-working spaces. We can get into kind of that. We have one of those in Jefferson in Northwest Iowa. Our other 3 spaces are all in the Des Moines area. We've also had a space in Cedar Falls for 2 years that we no longer have. So we've seen a couple different versions of what this could look like. This is actually the 10th year of Gravitate. So
congratulations.
Thank you. We've seen a lot in this time. And seen the industry change, but there are great co-working spaces all over Eastern Iowa. Those places, Council Bluffs, Sioux City, like they're doing it as well. I think to the density of people point for the entrepreneurial ecosystem, like the places where you find vibrant co-working scenes are the dense places, right? Like they kind of go hand in hand of like people wanting to come together and wanting to be in a community with each other. You may want to do that in rural Iowa. You just have to drive from 45 minutes out to Jefferson to do that because you pass a couple other small towns that don't have a co-working space yet. So
now you've obviously trained and collaborated with a lot of these co-working spaces throughout the state, not just your own. You've actually worked with a lot of these other co-working spaces.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say I've trained them, but
collaborated in some, because it's been a bunch of different. Because I've known you for years, and you've been working with them in some capacity. So again, reinforcing the very broad Iowa perspective. I want to talk about co-working in general, but this is kind of something that I often forget about is rural co-working. Are you kind of seeing a trend in rural co-working right now? Is this what I'm hearing?
I don't know that I have any data on that, but anecdotally, yes.
Anecdotally, yeah.
I think there is, well, I mean, take our location in Jefferson, right? So Jefferson is, I think, about 4,000 people, in the sense about an hour outside of Des Moines, northwest of here. They knew, like, so we started on that project 2019 maybe, and opened, I think, at the end of 2021. So like COVID kind of delayed it a little bit, like the initial wave of COVID that we had, but they knew that they wanted to, that the city, I'm saying, like in their plans, like wanted to have a meeting space, wanted to attract entrepreneurs, but also as we've gone, so they incentivized us to come there and really wanted this project to happen. We wouldn't have been there without like cooperation from the city and the county and like local people on the ground, all of those reasons. What I think they've seen from that is that now that this kind of shift to remote work discussion we're having, they've seen people move back. They've actually incentivized people to move back. Like there's grant programs that you can get if you move to Greene County. Part of that grant program, wisely and good for Gravitate, is that they will buy a year of co-working memberships for people that move back that qualify. You have to apply for it, but you can get that. So the idea is you're going to move back, or you could be new moving there, I think. You apply to get that grant, and then they want you to immediately have roots in the community so that you stay. And one way to build those roots is to join a co-working community, Gravitate Jefferson. So it's been beneficial to us as we get off the ground because we have more members than maybe, or faster adoption because it's grant-based for a lot of these folks. But then the hope is that they'll stay on and continue to do that. So I don't know that a lot of rural communities are doing that in the state yet, but they are in Greene County. And as far as other cities, like I know there's a group, Rural Ideas Network, I think they're called, out of Dubuque, that is doing a lot of kind of showing people how to build remote or rural co-working spaces in Northeast Iowa, and they're trying to expand. So we see them. They kind of take different levels. I think most of them aren't nearly the size of what we do in Des Moines. Our space in Jefferson, it's like one storefront on the square. So I think we're 1,400 square feet as opposed to 14,000 is Gravitate Downtown. So it's a different scale of what we're doing. So a lot of things are different than what we do here.
So I know people listening are screaming at me right now, and I've heard you, and you're saying, okay, this is cool, but what exactly is co-working? I don't even know what that is. So we're going to do a two-stage answer. What is it? And does rural people, like working from home, from companies who are able to move maybe to rural areas, which, I mean, I'm from Iowa, so I'm always like, why would someone want to move to a rural area? I love Iowa. I love living here, but it's a great place to live. But I never even think of like people vacationing or returning back to their roots or moving away from bigger cities because they're kind of sick of it. I kind of forget about how good we have it in some ways, how quiet it is, low crime. I forget about that stuff. So what is co-working? And are you seeing a rise in like work from home from rural? And is that like going to drive future co-working memberships? It's kind of a multi-part. I can break them down if you need to, but.
Yeah. What is co-working? I would say, basically just shared workspace communities is the way that I think about it. And there's different versions of that. We do it on a membership model. So you either pay by the hour, by the day, or by the month, similar to like a gym membership that you might have. But the difference with us in a gym membership, well, there's several, but one is that we want you to come in. Like that's what makes it lively here. A lot of gym memberships, they want you to sign up and they never come in. That's kind of how they build their model. We actually
really funny, actually.
We want to have you here, right?
Yeah.
To come in and be part of it. So, we do that also by the hour. That's usually like a conference room that if you just need to rent a room to be like bring your remote team in together for a couple hours, on a Friday, you can do that here. You can have an individual seat if you're a solo employee or a remote work employee, like you want to have a kind of a coffee shop seat. You can do that with us. So we call that a floating desk. And then by the month could be a dedicated desk where you bring in your own monitors, you bring pictures of the kids, like that's a desk that only you use. Or an office that we have, which is similar to how you set up your studio here is in an office. So we kind of cater to all versions of that with co-working, and it's probably different where you're going. Like every co-working space is somewhat unique in how they operate. So you'll find different versions of that. There's actually a mastermind group that I'm in of co-working space owner. There's somebody that only does it by the day and by the hour in New Jersey.
Wow.
That I work with, and she's got a very different model there. To your point, so that's like kind of what is co-working. And like the benefits of co-working are not just about the office space. So that's what we talk about first. And I think that's what people think of is like, do you have quality desks? Do you have quiet rooms? Do you have a phone booth for me to take a phone call? Those types of things. Those are the questions we get from people when they come in and tour. So we have to have all those things, like that's baseline. But really what sets co-working apart is the membership. It's the people. It's bringing folks together. We do that virtually in some things, like we have a Slack instance for Gravitate where a lot of people chat. Justin, you're active in that.
Heck yeah.
And then we also have people, we want you to really feel like the other members of the co-working space are your coworkers. You're just not working for the same company. So people that will meet and go grab lunch, they'll go grab coffee. They'll talk about, the game last night or those types of things. Things you would do around the water cooler in the office. You can't do that at home, or you do it over Zoom. And it's not the same interaction with people. So we want to provide that for you. It's just that rather than your coworker being somebody employed by the same company, your coworker is whoever's sitting next to you or your friends, that type of thing. And we've seen everything in our 10 years develop from that. So friendships, we've seen companies be created by people that met here. We've seen marriages of people that met here that fell in love and got married. So we have and then we'll do, sometimes I know we've had volleyball teams, like rec league volleyball teams in the past that are just Gravitate members, like all those things that are like the best pieces of working in an office that isn't, sitting in meetings with your boss and those types of things that may be what you dread about going to the office, at least in kind of the NBC The Office type of mentality. So.
Yeah, because there are positive aspects of going into a co-working space. And like I said to everybody, I've worked at Gravitate for years. And I used to think, I wanted to do it because I didn't want to work from my house. I hate working from my house. I know some people love it. I did it for years, hate it. I want to be around other people. I assumed it was because I'm an extrovert. And what I've actually discovered is introverts and extroverts, I work alongside them at Gravitate, because extroverts, obviously, they're like, I don't want to work from home, I'm going to go stir crazy. But introverts are like, I need to be out talking with other people, and this is an environment where I can control how much I'm in the space, or, it's an environment where I don't actually have to work with my boss or forced into these awkward meetings. It's because I want to be there, which is really, really interesting.
The mental health and kind of healthcare aspects of co-working are not something we talk about a lot, but it is probably the biggest. It's probably the thing we should be talking about first, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
The Surgeon General put out an advisory maybe a couple of months ago now, but basically said there is an epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah.
In the United States. I thought I wrote down epidemic of loneliness and isolation.
I did see that. Yeah.
And he was talking about, because I think, was he Obama's Surgeon General as well? So he's
gosh. I have no idea.
I was just kind of reading the note on it to refresh myself this morning, but he said he has noticed this all along. So it's not just COVID and work from home and the things that have developed in the last 3 years. It's going all the way back to the internet and phones and heads down all the time, withdrawing from society and becoming isolated. So he doesn't specifically credit co-working as the solution to that, but I think it certainly is a piece to play. Back in 2015, the Harvard Business Review, of which I believe you're a fan,
big fan,
did a big story on research that they did where they basically said that people join co-working spaces to thrive because of all the things we talked about they're choosing to be there, right? So you can work for a company remote that you love wherever in the world it is, but you can choose the office space you go to. You can choose the people that you're around there, the people you like. You're not just stuck on a team, in an office with folks that you don't get along with. So, I think people need that connection. They need that passion of just having people around. So that's why people go work at coffee shops. And if you think about it, coffee shops are probably the worst place to work because you don't know about who's sitting next to you, how distracted you're going to be, but you like the energy that's around you at a coffee shop. And, hopefully you don't need to go to the bathroom because what do? Pack up all your stuff and take it with you then lose your seat? Or do you leave it out there and just ask the person you never met sitting across the next table, will you keep an eye on that? There's lots of reasons why I go to coffee shops for the coffee, not necessarily to work there. But you see lots of people. Every time I walk into a coffee shop and you see a ton of people, I'm like, this area needs a co-working space, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what these people are really here for. And coffee shops don't really want you there because they want to turn that table over and serve much more coffees. They don't want you sitting there for 6 hours. So, but that energy, that's why we bring, kind of why we exist. And I think that while we started, and we were talking about entrepreneurialism earlier on, I think we started as a startup space. Literally the name Gravitate came from the idea of an entrepreneurial center of gravity in Des Moines is what we wanted. We have relaxed that entrepreneurial messaging because we found that our product works so well for so many other people.
Right.
And most of our growth beyond our first two spaces has been, I would say, remote workers.
Yeah, and so are you seeing that growth then? This whole remote work trend. Some people call it work from home. It's not. Like you pointed out, people don't hesitate to go to a coffee shop to work if they're working from home. They do it a lot. And so are you seeing the hybrid or remote or work from wherever trend? Is that partially responsible or mostly responsible for filling seats at co-working spaces?
Anecdotally, again, but I would say
that's fine.
I would say it's largely responsible. It certainly is with us. Because, we've got to this point in society, which is why I really like one positive of a terrible thing that was the pandemic was going to this kind of work from home, or I like to say like work from anywhere policy that people have. It's like you can work wherever you want to, because even companies that create mandates to be in the headquarters office, like you can certainly do that to bring your team back into the office. But that team member, if they're good, and you probably only want them if they're good, they're going to have options to work elsewhere. That allows for a work from anywhere policy. So that's a lot of our members. Like we have people with jobs all over the world that come in here into our spaces and work together. And I just can't imagine that that's going to slow down. Maybe that statement will haunt me in a couple of years, but like, I think
I hope not.
As tools get better, as more co-working spaces like get developed around, like you'll just choose like, where do I want to live? Okay, I want to live in Des Moines, Iowa because I'm from there, because I really like the ag industry, whatever it is. Like I want to live in Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm going to work for this company in Silicon Valley, or I'm going to work for this company in London, but I'm going to work from here. So I'm going to have a cool office that I can go to with good people that I want to see every day, and I'm going to do work that I love. Like that's kind of like the trifecta of what everyone wants in life, right? So like only some people are all three of those things like tethered to a building. And like that's the old school way of thinking, like that we need to be within driving distance of that building. So I guess that's just my thought on that. That will keep growing. And the other thing that's interesting, kind of along that line that we're seeing, is the concept of, I guess another reason why I see this expanding, Abby, who's our director of operations, we were talking about this the other day, is kind of this term zombie buildings that we're seeing in dense major metros. And we're actually starting to see it here in Des Moines as well. I think the Wells Fargo buildings will become this. I don't know if they're out of those yet.
I don't know, but there's like the Nationwide building downtown. There are rumors of them abandoning that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, didn't the...
Downtown Des Moines is what
but I believe Wells Fargo had like 5 buildings that they're vacating out to their West Des Moines campus. So like what goes into those buildings, right? So I think that there have been more zombie buildings on the market. We just haven't known it because they've been under lease.
Sure.
But since people went to remote work policies in 2020 because of, healthcare reasons, or public health reasons, I should say, a lot of people haven't come back. So those leases are just now, if they were 5, 10, 15-year leases, we're just going to start to see more and more of those come on the market because people aren't going to return. And I think that is just going to fuel more co-working spaces and more of that mental health need of people to connect into spaces like ours. So I feel really big about our future and where co-working goes. I think we're still starting to see this even 10 years in for Gravitate, maybe 20 years in since the word co-working has been a thing, but like it still feels very nascent what we're doing.
Right. I mean, it does seem like something about co-working attracts all the best parts of working in an office and somehow kills off all the worst parts. Like, one thing I'm always struck when I see a co-working space that you don't see obviously in a coffee shop. You don't know anybody there. You're not going to build those relationships. Maybe you're going to build a relationship with a barista, right? That's probably normal. But one thing that is really interesting to me is what you pointed out earlier, which I wanted to push in on a little bit. You mentioned that you have had companies created because other members were like co-working and ended up creating a company. So is this like co-working, your people coming from different companies, is this kind of this creative collision? Is it allowing people who are normally in one particular sphere of influence to kind of look outside their own self-perspective and become more self-aware? And they're like, oh my gosh, someone else at another table, I never thought about that problem that way. Sparking new creative solutions. Is this something that co-working spaces kind of lend themselves to?
Yeah, I mean, you referred to it as kind of a town square. Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So if you are, sitting in the kitchen one day and are complaining about a problem in your industry and somebody else is also in the kitchen and they hear about the problem and be like, well, I think there's a solution to that I could work on. Like, do you want to work on that together? I mean, that could happen at the bar, that could happen at the park, that could happen places like that. But like, because you're not just sitting with your team in a corporate headquarters office, you're sitting with like a diverse group of people. I think that it probably happens more often than you would think. In a space like ours. So like we've seen that happen. I wouldn't say it happens daily or anything like that, but we do have like evidence where we've seen companies happen and for the most part, I think that's been a really solid benefit of co-working.
It's really a good antidote to groupthink, because when you're in a company culture, there's a lot of pressure to act a certain way or go along with the boss or the team lead. But when you're at a co-working space, it seems like you have a little bit more freedom to talk openly about the problems you're struggling with because your boss isn't standing there listening to you like work through this problem. I mean, just in my own personal experience, there was something I was struggling with on a website that was mine. There was some bug. And I asked my web developer how much it was going to cost to fix, and it was like a couple $1,000s. And then I asked Gravitate. I asked the Slack channel. I'm like, what is wrong with this? Why isn't it loading? And someone within 10 seconds is like, oh, there's an error. There's like an additional comma in like line 200 of code or whatever. So I told my developer, and I was like, how much to fix this? He's like, oh, that takes me 30 seconds. I'll do that for free. So like literally one member solved a $2,000 problem for me. And I do see that happening quite a bit. And it's not always like a new breakthrough company, but sometimes it's just these subtle things. Like, and I'm asking members all the time, what would you do in this situation? Or do you know anybody that has this thing? Or, you know, that kind of, I see that all the time.
Yes, Slack is a great place for that because within our coworking
and just
space,
the community in general, I see that.
Yeah, you can actually absolutely do that in person, but I think when you do it in Slack, and these are people that you have a relationship with because you're all Gravitate members, right? So it's a little bit filtered versus just going on Twitter or whatever it is today and saying like, hey, I have this question. Does anybody know the answer? Like these are people that are kind of invested in you getting a successful solution because you're all members. Like you have an affinity towards each other as coworking space members. You're part of the community. So not just like business need, like you said there, but also we see, I think one of our most popular channels is the homes channels. And it's people like asking questions about like, hey, I need a tile guy, or
yes,
this is dripping. Should it be? Like, you know, things like that.
I've seen those. Yeah.
Yeah. I use it all the time. Same thing, the tech support channel. Like I don't use it for like, I have like a big tech question. It's like, my iPhone's not working this way. And
I've done that too.
There'll be somebody that's like, have you tried this? You know, and you're like, wow, that works. Like just like that ability. And one reason I like doing that in Slack as well as in person is you get people from all four of our spaces participate in the Slack, and not just like an individual one. So that's
a really good point. Are you going to see as corporate people push, I don't know if I actually don't know if they're pushing people to remote or in person. It seems like depending on the organization, but as corporations look more friendly to remote work, are you going to start to see a trend of them almost co-sponsoring or sponsoring co-working spaces? Because like let's use, just not to pick on Wells Fargo, but if Wells Fargo says, we don't think the future is giant mega center corporate buildings, we see our employees distributed across the state. And what's a better use of their money? Is it building tons of little offices everywhere, or just partnering with current co-working spaces? Are we going to see this like bunch of different companies co-locating employees into co-working spaces? Because I'm asking this because I see this as a very real future.
Yes. I don't think, if I understand the question, like I don't think you'll see big like multinational companies having co-working spaces. I think you'll see them using co-working spaces. And we see it today. So I call that enterprise co-working. I don't know if that's a real term, but like these, like we have 3 of them that I can think of that are big multinational companies right now that utilize our space. And almost all of them, yes, all of them have come here because of a corporate directive to be here.
Yeah.
So they're Des Moines-based teams, or they're teams that have a reason to be in Des Moines and drive in, and they want them co-located together, at least for meetings, if not for more significant work. And they want to provide them with a space, but they don't want to have to. I think with 2 of them, like their lease, kind of zombie building idea, their leases had come up. I'm like, we're not going to release, but we do want a space that you can go to and work at and have that. So they've come and found us. There are tools for that, and one of these companies uses this, one called DeskPass, that we use. Like we are a kind of operator on the DeskPass platform, but what's good about DeskPass, another one's called Liquid Space that we use, is that there's like one account that a big multinational company, it's not Apple, we were talking Apple before, but like, let's say Apple would come in and they would say, we want all our remote employees now to go to a space. We're going to have an account on DeskPass, and then DeskPass will handle the billing to Gravitate. So Apple's not getting 500 co-working spaces sending individual $50 an hour bills to them. They're just paying DeskPass once, and DeskPass is handling all of those things. So we have a very frequent customer. Actually, we weren't on DeskPass, and this company came to us and they said, we have a client in Des Moines that needs co-working space. Use this so that they can come here. And then it's been very good for us. So that's how we see that's one way we see the enterprise market. Like so they pay Liquid Space, they pay DeskPass, or Dasana is a new one that we've affiliated with that's kind of UK based and moving into the US. But that's a thing where the big companies can pay them, and that helps their accounting. But so it's a nice in between thing, and then DeskPass gets a cut, of the membership. Yeah. But we set our prices.
It's almost like Expedia or something. They're for their members, they're showing here great places with rates, and we can book it for you. Yeah. And then they're reselling your inventory to a bunch of different people that there's no way on earth you'd ever know who they are or where they're at. That's kind of what's going on.
And I
didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, and Liquid Space has been around since the beginning of co-working, kind of doing that, but they've gotten much more popular recently. And one reason is that the GSA, like the government. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What is the GSA?
I know what the GSA is. I always forget the acronym.
Government Services Administration, something like that.
They do all the building purchases and stuff like that too.
Yeah, so they did a major master co-working contract for federal employees to be able to use co-working spaces.
Oh, fascinating.
And DeskPass may be part of that as well.
Gosh, that would be a really good use for our tax money, by the way. Less reliance on all these building upkeep, which takes a lot of money. That would be kind of a brilliant use of that.
And I would imagine that the federal government is having the same hiring issues, so they're hiring remote employees now. So they don't necessarily have a federal building for you to go to in that city necessarily. So now that, and I think there is a mandate in there that so much of the dollars go to people like me, to independent operators.
Interesting.
And that one of the ways you can get that is to go through Liquid Space and be a partner with them. Now, not a lot of that has actually happened yet, because I think
it's starting to happen, though, is what you're saying.
Yeah, the contract's in place and the government's still trying to figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. But it's cool that the federal government recognized this trend.
That is interesting.
They're just late to adopt because of government reasons, right?
So just last 10 seconds, can people drop into a Gravitate and give the website out so people can find you? If there's somewhere in Iowa near a Gravitate, they want to jump in. How does that work?
Yeah, gravitatecoworking.com is our web address. You can certainly drop in and we can set you up on that day, or you can go to the website and kind of book a day ahead of time. But all of our plans are on there. We're very transparent about our pricing. So if you want to see things, or if you ever want a tour, you can also book a tour on there and see the different locations.
Geoff Wood, founder and owner of Gravitate. This is definitely not sponsored. I just wanted to have you in here because I've loved Gravitate. It's been a core part of my life as an entrepreneur, and I really appreciate you being in Iowa. And I know if you're listening, you'd probably appreciate it too. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Justin.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.